About a week back, I said the TruthEar Hexa is my new benchmark under $100. So the question then became, what happened to all my other favorites? What happened to the Olina SE or my favorite Etymotic ER2SE? And how does it compare with the humble $20 7Hz Zero? Will 4 times the money get you 4 times the sound? We'll answer all of that today. Alright, first let's start off at the $80 to $100 price category. We'll start off talking about the Etymotic ER2SE, which in my opinion was kind of the benchmark for me, but generally speaking I wouldn't recommend it to a lot of people for a couple of reasons. So let's talk about that. The Etymotic ER2SE is a fantastic example of what can be when you're not necessarily just following the tuning of everybody else. Etymotic does their own thing and they do it bloody well for the most part. Now, the things you'll notice with the Etymotics is that they are a little bit treble shy. Actually, they're quite a bit treble shy compared to both the Hexa and the Olina, and therefore they will not sound as sparkly. Mind you, when I'm listening for it, the detail is still there. All the little nuances in the treble, they all seem to be there. I didn't really hear that much of a difference between them. Overall though, it's going to sound less sparkly and therefore seem a little less detailed to a lot of people. Where it excels though is that mid-range. 2 reasons. Number one, it's got the most beautiful flat mid-range, giving you the level of transparency that it still blows my mind to this day. I was listening to them last night and I got lost just listening to them. That's what I love about all of these. They're all very good. But one thing I like about the ER2SE over say the Hexa is that it's got a little more vocal presence in the 2 to 3 kilohertz range, and I prefer that, and it actually drops off after 3 kilohertz in a way that's different from all the other IEMs, and that gives a different sound. And this thing is probably one of the most natural sounding for mids that I have experienced in this price category. It's also a little bass shy. That is to say, it's a little sub bass shy. Mid bass is still there. It's still tight. It's punchy. It's not overly emphasized into the mix, and I prefer that, but I know a lot of people want more energy in the bass. Nonetheless, the one good thing about not having such a big sub bass emphasis is that things are still evident. Like if you listen to the Hans Zimmer's Batman soundtrack, which is a favorite, I know everybody listens to it as a test track. There's a reason for it. It's bloody good. There are parts 3 minutes into the track called Why So Serious. There's a bit that has a lot of sub bass in it, but then it's got some things happening in the background. Those things are both in the Olina SE as well as the Hexa you have to really listen for. In the Etymotic, it's just there. It is just evident. And that is the thing. If I were to sum up the Etymotic ER2SE for you very concisely, then I would say that sound is just evident. Detail in any kind of track is just present, it's evident, and it just sounds natural. The downside, of course, is that because it's a dynamic driver, it is not the fastest reproduction of sound. Balanced armatures will do a better job of certain things. Now, that very mid-bass emphasis I was talking about, the bass drums do hit. They're reasonably punchy, but they're not very tightly controlled. And in that sense, both the Olina and the Hexa do better. The Hexa particularly does a lot better. Still, while I wax lyrical about the Etymotic ER2SE, there is the elephant in the room, and that is the ergonomics. I place quite a big emphasis on ergonomics when I'm recommending things to people, because while I might eschew ergonomics in favor of sound quality because I prefer it that way, I don't think everybody else should. I don't think manufacturers should get away with that sort of thing. It's the same reason I don't like the TruthEar Clinical Zero, because a 7mm wide nozzle is, in my opinion, too much for a lot of people, and it just shouldn't be that uncomfortable. It really shouldn't. Which is why the ER2SE is still not going to be a recommendation for anybody by and large. But if you're an audiophile, if you're a collector, then this deserves a place in your collection because it's just something you have to experience. Just make sure you get the right fit though. Alright. Now moving on to the TruthEar Hexa. This is our $80 king of the hill, as it were, but why is it? Well, there's a couple of things that stand out about the Hexa. For one thing, I like the styling, and for another, the nozzle diameter is a little bit on the wider side, and therefore, again, I'm a little critical about the ergonomics here, but the shell itself fits in the ear really well. As far as the actual sound, there's definitely a little lack of energy both in the mid bass as well as the mids themselves. That is to say 2 to 3 kilohertz range, which the Etymotic does really well. This one lacks a bit of energy. You can EQ up the mids, but you can't seem to EQ up the mid bass. It's not capable of giving you a little more mid bass. What mid bass is there is really tight, really punchy, and really well controlled. So I like that about it. I do think there's a little too much emphasis on the sub bass. Again, on that same track by Hans Zimmer, That's the problem. There's just too much sub bass and it ends up masking certain other things that are happening in the background. If you listen to a lot of heavy metal, maybe a little Children of Boredom or the Doom soundtrack, I've been tripping on that for the past couple of weeks. Same thing. You don't have that mid-bass punch and emphasis. It's there. It's not bad. It's just not as in your face as I think it should be. But the sub bass does make up for it by giving a lot of girth, a lot of volume, a little low end rumble, if you will. Overall though, I think it's a very, very clean sounding IEM, really clean transparent mids, a slight metallic timbre perhaps. That's more to do with the tuning. Honestly, it's not that bad. In terms of the treble, it's a little bit more forward than the ER2SE for sure. In fact, it's quite a bit more forward, but in my opinion, it doesn't get too fatiguing. I like things a little darker than this, but to a lot of people who like the Harman target, the Hexa will seem a smidge darker. But honestly, for longer listening sessions, I find that to be less fatiguing. And that is in a nutshell the Hexa. It's a clean, not fatiguing sound with a good balance of things. And to really emphasize the balance, we have to talk about the Olina SE and then come back to the Hexa. So let's talk about it. This thing costs $20 more. It's the Olina SE. It's a combination of Tripowin's efforts and Hawaiian Bad Boy's efforts, and I love it. It's not perfect. Where the Hexa is, and pardon the simile here, where the Hexa might be a clean, sparkling white, the Olina SE is very much a lush, full-bodied red. Given the choice, I honestly tend to go for the red sometimes. Doesn't mean I'll recommend it to everyone. Why? Okay, there's definitely a warmth, and that means a little more muddiness in the mids. So vocals tend to be a little more muddied when there are deeper male vocals. But this, in my opinion, strikes a better balance between mid bass and sub bass than the Hexa. The sub bass is there, but the mid bass is a little more emphasized and therefore not quite as imbalanced to my ears, just my personal preference. In the upper mids, again, there's a little more of that vocal emphasis that I prefer, makes vocals sound a little more lush, a little more intimate. While the treble region is similar to the Hexa, it's not too different, and both of them I think sound very similar. So my deciding factor between the Hexa and the Olina would be whether you want a little more lush and energetic vocals and whether you want the warmth down low. Having said that, ergonomics wise, this one seems to fit me a bit better. It feels narrower in my ear with the tips they've given, so I tend to reach for the Olina SE more. But I still wouldn't recommend the Olina over the Hexa, and the reason is twofold. The Olina is actually better for EQing. You can EQ the warmth out of the Olina, you can get a cleaner sound signature, and then you've got something very similar to the Hexa. But what you can't get in relation to the Hexa is that tight, punchy mid bass. So if I didn't know whether you wanted the warmth or not, I think it would be a safer option if I just recommended the Hexa to you, because you get the clean mids without having the overly sharp upper mid and treble quality that a lot of IEMs seem to push for in order to give you that feeling of clarity and air, if you will. But there is one other big reason why I would choose the Hexa over the Olina for the vast majority of the people, and that is layering. While both of them are very similarly capable in terms of soundstage, in terms of imaging, in terms of resolution, honestly the differences are so little it's not worth mentioning. I would still say the balanced armatures edge the Olina out just a little bit, and this is especially evident on really busy tracks. If there's a lot going on in a track, the single dynamic driver of the Olina SE starts to mess up on the layering a little bit. It's not unlistenable, but it is definitely not as good as the Hexa. The Hexa still maintains its clean representation of sound and layers the sound. It's not great at layering by itself, but in this company of IEMs, it seems to do a better job of handling busier passages of music. And that is why the Hexa is still my recommendation, is still my benchmark overall for the $80, because it seems to balance a number of things right without getting too many things wrong. That is incredible value for $80. But the other question today is, how does it compare with the $20 7Hz Zero, which is still my benchmark for the $20 category? I know a lot of you have mentioned the Tangzhou Weiner. I haven't got it. I've reached out to Linsol. Linsol, if you're listening, then send it over, please. I would love to review that. Maybe we'll have a battle, a $20 IEM battle. Why not? Also, the Moondrop GU is due out soon, and that's going to be exciting because it comes with a USB-C instead of a headphone jack, and I think it does DSP things and improves on the Moondrop Chew basically. So there's interesting stuff coming, but the 7Hz Zero is still some of the best things I have heard for $20. How do they compare? Okay. First off, I'm going to say this and people are going to hate me for it. This is a really nice balance between mid bass and sub bass. Mind you, it's still a rising curve towards the sub bass, but the sub bass itself is not overly emphasized. The boost isn't that much. and therefore to me it sounds like a better balance. It's really fun to listen to, and I still love it. I put these on yesterday after I tried all these $80-$100 IEMs, and I just sat back and I smiled once again because my god, what value. In terms of ergonomics, I'll say yeah, the nozzle's a little wide, but more importantly, I think it keeps slipping out of your ear over time. Maybe use foam tips to sort that out. For $20, this is still quite incredible and is just a beautifully balanced IEM, lovely mids, nice highs. The thing that lets the 7Hz zero down, just as I said in the original review, and this applies to gaming performance as well. It's great for esports gaming. I still maintain that. The Hexa, also very good. Very nice in terms of listening for footsteps. It's a little more pushed forward, in fact, on the Hexa. So honestly, the Hexa's better, but where it really races ahead is, again, busy passages of music. The Zero loses its composure when you're listening to heavy tracks, or then there's a lot going on at the same time. Like if you're playing the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer mode, there's a ton of things going on. The Zero will sound like things are falling apart. The Olina SE also kind of loses its composure to some extent, but the Hexa, that is where it excels. I think it's the multiple driver setup. Now the fact that the Hexa has 4 times the number of drivers as the Zero for 4 times the price, I was gonna say that as a joke, but apparently it makes a difference. It is genuinely a performance difference between the two. So should you step up from the $20 to the $80 price category? If you can, yeah, I think you get a lot more for your money. I really do. But if you can't, my god, the Zero is still fantastic. Like, what a marvel of tuning. And that's it. It's a brilliant time to be an audiophile. It's an even more brilliant time to subscribe to this channel. I'll see you in the next one. Stay happy, stay peaceful, stay colorful. Namaste.